Chrysalis is an organization that helps people return to the workforce. And what it allows them to do is to come from something like prison, some bump in their life, homelessness, addiction, whatever it might be, and they help them re-engage and get personal agency. The idea that with a job, you become part of something, and most importantly, you get reintroduced to society. Particularly if you're in prison or something else, it's just hard to return. You're not used to it, and you don't necessarily know what to do. You haven't had some basic skills developed. Or in the event of a personal crisis, same type of thing is you need that confidence to come back in, and Chrysalis is an amazing organization that really helps facilitate that. My first job was paperboy when I was about 10 years old, and it was a terrible job for me because I did not like getting up early, and I will honestly say that probably there are a lot of people who didn't get their paper, so that probably was not a reflection of my best job. A little bit later on, I started working construction when I was about 14 or 15. And that was really a good experience for me. Most of what I did was pretty crappy work. And then from there, I was able to work in the restaurant industry when I turned 16. And that was a great exposure. I worked as a busboy and did some cleaning in a Mexican restaurant called El Gordo's in Los Gatos, California. And it was a great experience for me because one is it gave me some sense of responsibility. I was not probably the most responsible child growing up, and it also gave me my own money and allowed me to ultimately buy a car, and all that at that point conveyed to me to be freedom. So that work was great. I don't think I was the best worker at first, but luckily the folks who work there, the manager Scott, and some of the wait people who were a little bit older, were probably in their 30s, were very understanding, and they allowed me to improve my skill set there. So I worked there for just over a year and then picked up some side jobs. I then dropped out of high school and went into construction, and that was a great experience. I had several people who were really supportive and ultimately really supportive of me going back to school and getting into college, which was kind of part of the cool thing about the workplace. I will admit, when I was young and 17, 18 years old and working in restaurants and in construction, having that money, which seemed like endless amounts of money, was really great. But the best part of it is that sense of responsibility and having things like, I can remember one time where my boss basically made me manager for the day in a construction site. And to this day, every time I drive by that property up in Los Altos, California, it's a series of 15 homes. I was responsible for breaking out the wood, making sure people showed up on time, and doing a lot of cleanup, a lot of grunt work, but it was worth it. And it was something that made me really proud and gave me the confidence to try other things. And that's why, for me, those first couple of jobs were really an essential part of me building on a future. I think the biggest barriers for me were bad decisions. I, like a lot of people, didn't necessarily understand how things work. So I had my idea of the world and how the world actually worked. And the workplace, particularly the jobs that I worked in, gave you feedback pretty immediately, and that was great. Dropping out of high school definitely caused me it slowed my progress in the working world. And at the time, I just was a bad decision, and that left me on my own. I still had a really great family and everything else, but they were smart enough to let me figure myself out and kind of grow into that. In particular, what was great about that for me was just the ability to fail and recognize that failure was not a destination, it was just an experience. And I think that formed a lot of my ability to work through things later in life. Throughout my life, I've really actually lucked into many mentors. Early on, they were probably just people that I worked with. I can remember a few names here and there. Sadly, probably not last names. Also had a very close friend named Nick Vigil, who was far more responsible than me and was an important part of kind of formation of what it meant to be responsible. He taught me about how to manage my finances. He was really dependable. He was someone that I really admired and looked up and am still friends with to this day. I think in addition to that, later in life, in businesses, as I went to a more entrepreneurial route, I was lucky enough to work with several people. A gentleman named Al Dubrow, who was probably 30 years my senior and was very patient. I think he probably found me entertaining more than anything, because I could make rapidly bad decisions over and over again, and he helped me slow down and start to think about the consequences of some of the things that I was doing. So he was really great, and I've had several others since then, and some partners who've been very essential in me forming my view of the world and helping me make decisions about how I look at things. A strong workforce is key to not just Orange County, but to this country. I think the workforce itself is the fabric of a society, and giving people the ability to feel like they can make a contribution that matters and be part of something that is greater than themselves is an essential part of humanity from my standpoint. Whether that's your church community, whether that's your social community, your friends, etc. But being in a workplace where you feel like you have, and I've used the term agency, you have that personal impact on what you're doing is really an important part of work. And it's easy to forget that. It's easy, and I've done it many times myself, to feel like things are happening to me, and recognizing that in order for me to have an impact in my own life, I have to be able to see myself as someone who can make change, cause change, create benefits, add value. And that has been an essential part of what has helped me in my life. Doesn't mean it's been all uphill. I've fallen on my face lots of times. I've probably made more bad decisions. Well, actually, I don't even probably, 100% made more bad decisions than good decisions. But the key is there have been a lot of people around me who care. And I think that's something that we're responsible for as a community, is to give people an opportunity, and you can open doors for them, then they need to decide to go through. And I think that's the thing that Chrysalis does, is it open doors for people who don't know how to open those doors. And once they're through, some of the results are just amazing. And that's not just a Chrysalis, that's something that businesses by their nature should do. That's one of the things that I think is really cool about community-based businesses, where you have small businesses where they're taking in young people and they're actually teaching them about work ethic. That's not available to people who have been waylaid by prison or other things, because they never had that initial formation experience. So that's, from my standpoint, an important part of what the business community needs to do. And then organizations like Chrysalis allow us to help engage with people who didn't have that same opportunity for those formation of how you work and what work really is. I actually, when I initially dropped out of high school, had a few good years working, and then ended up homeless myself. Not for a long period of time, but for about 3 weeks. And then a friend of mine, Mike Reed, was kind enough to take me in, and I couch surfed at his place until I could get my feet underneath me. But that allowed me to continue to work and be in college, and it was an important moment in my life. Still friends with Mike Reed, just a great human being. One of the challenges that we have personally in our own family is I have a sister who has been homeless several times, and a lot of it is related to mental health. And those are the challenges that are very frustrating, because you can't easily overcome those things, and those things are outside of the control of the individual. And when you watch that and you're part of that system, you become very frustrated with it, because here you have this person who at moments is brilliant and at moments is really challenged by their own personal demons, and it's hard to watch. And that emotion, I have another friend who actually was in prison for a year later in life, very successful businessman, someone I'm proud to call a friend. And I learned a lot about what happened in prison and the prison system, and how deleterious it is to the nature of humanity. And when you come out of there, you lack a lot of confidence. You don't know what to do. And it's a really terrible circumstance to emerge into a society and just not know what to do next. So that's where I think Chrysalis is just phenomenal. Both my wife Susan and I are amazed by what they've done, but more important, we think that is worth supporting. And then in our own businesses, we think it's important to find ways to allow people to come back into community and, again, to establish themselves and become part of something so they can build their families, they can support themselves, they can be examples to people in less fortunate communities. And that's why this is important to us.